On Tuesday morning, the classroom buzzed with energy, half fueled by juice boxes and whispers of the upcoming showcase. A few students were already planning their posters. One had brought in a shoebox full of yarn, and another claimed he'd be singing. Sophie worked at her desk, sketching tiny sunflowers in the margin of her worksheet in silence. When the others moved to the rug for story time, she lingered. Clara came and sat beside her. "Thinking about your project?" she asked. Sophie nodded, eyes still on her paper. After a moment, she looked up. "Do you have to invite your mom?" Clara blinked. "To the showcase?" Sophie nodded again, slower this time. Clara softened. "You don't have to invite anyone you don't want to. It's your day." Sophie's pencil stilled. "She probably won't come anyway." There was no anger in the girl's face, no sadness. It was just a statement of fact, heavy and flat. Clara let the silence settle between them before replying. "Well, then we'll make sure it's a good day without her." Sophie looked at her for a long moment. Then, with a tiny nod, she joined the others on the rug. Later, after the last car pulled away and the room fell quiet, Clara stayed late, sorting glue sticks and construction paper into tidy bins. She wasn't surprised when Daniel appeared in the doorway, coat dusted with the afternoon wind. "Sophie mentioned the showcase," he said. "Said you told her she didn't have to invite Vanessa." Clara stood, brushing glitter off her palms. "She brought it up. I just tried to make it safe." Daniel nodded, a slow, thoughtful motion, like he wasn't sure how much to say. "Vanessa hasn't seen Sophie in 8 months," he said finally. "No birthdays, no visits, just a card at Christmas with the wrong spelling." Clara waited. "She left when Sophie was 6, said she needed something else, something more." Daniel wasn't bitter or even sad. He just spoke low and steady, like naming things out loud gave them weight and shape. "She married a guy who builds golf resorts in Scottsdale," he said. "I don't think she meant to disappear, but she did." Clara leaned against the edge of the desk, not speaking, just letting it breathe. "I try not to make excuses for her," Daniel said. "But I also don't want Sophie growing up thinking love leaves when it gets uncomfortable." Clara's throat tightened. "She doesn't," she said. "At least not with you." Daniel looked down, smiled faintly. "Still, when she asks about the showcase, I know what she's not asking." "She doesn't need perfect," Clara said, stepped forward, her voice quieter now. "All she needs is someone to be there for her." The words settled between them. Daniel looked at her then, not just with gratitude, but something else. Something quieter, warmer. And Clara felt it again, that steady pull between them. There were no promises, no certainty, just something real, building in the space between conversations. He left with a thank you, soft and brief. Clara stayed in the room long after he was gone, her hands still resting on the same desk, not ready to move. On Friday, the school was quieter than usual after the final bell. Teachers lingered in the lounge, sipping lukewarm coffee and pretending they weren't already thinking about Monday. Clara sat at the end of the table, grading math quizzes with a fading pink pen. Melissa slid into the chair across from her, dropping a small bag of popcorn between them. "You looked like you needed this." Clara raised an eyebrow. "I look like popcorn?" "You look like guilt and silent denial, which usually means popcorn is appropriate." Clara huffed a laugh. "It's not denial if there's nothing to deny." Melissa tilted her head and waited. Clara capped her pen and folded her arms, waiting to meet her friend's eyes. "Okay, I like Daniel. I do. I think he's kind and steady, and the way he talks to Sophie makes me want to cry sometimes. But nothing is happening. Not really." Melissa nodded. "Not yet." "Not ever," Clara added, more out of obligation than certainty. There was a pause between them, pregnant with unspoken feelings and words that seemed inadequate. If there was anyone who could read her, it was Melissa. She had always had that knack, that instinctive understanding of Clara that sometimes seemed more accurate than Clara's interpretation of her own feelings. "Rachel's been talking more," Melissa said finally. "She's not just hinting, she's saying things, suggesting you're involved. Though she hasn't said as much, the implication is that your behavior with Daniel is inappropriate." Clara's jaw tightened. She has no proof, because there's nothing to prove. True, but she's not after truth, she's after leverage. Clara leaned back, tired of it all. So what do I do? Avoid him? Avoid them both? No. Instead, you keep teaching, remain true to yourself. But maybe think about where this could go, if it goes anywhere. That part settled between them heavier than the rest. Melissa picked up a paper quiz. Also, you're a monster for giving word problems on a Friday. Clara smiled. Barely. That evening, Clara stopped at the small grocery store 2 blocks from her apartment. She was halfway through the frozen section, debating whether she had the energy to cook, when a familiar voice called from the next aisle. Miss Hayes? Clara turned, surprised. Sophie stood by the cereal boxes, holding a box of granola like it was a rare treasure. Daniel appeared a second later, pushing a small cart with a loaf of bread and a bunch of bananas. Evening, he said, a little sheepish. Clara smiled. Evening. Big night in? Spaghetti or something resembling it. Sophie held up the granola. This is for dessert. Classy, Clara said. You've got range. They chatted a minute longer. Just light talk. School, weekend plans, the unfair price of grapes. Then Sophie tugged at Daniel's sleeve. Can Miss Clara come over? Daniel looked at Clara, half apologetic. She means for dinner. She's getting bold. I appreciate the invite, Clara said with a laugh. But I've got a stack of book reports and a fridge full of indecision. Daniel smiled, then nodded towards Sophie. She talks about you like you're some kind of magician. The way you show up in her drawings, it's not small. Clara's breath caught just slightly. She's easy to care about. Another moment passed, longer than casual. It was not uncomfortable, but full of the things neither of them had said out loud. I should let you two finish shopping, Clara said, stepping back. Sophie waved. Bye, Miss Hayes. Daniel offered a nod and a small, quiet smile. See you Monday. Clara walked away, one hand in her coat pocket, unsure why her heart felt louder than before. She didn't turn around, but she knew he was still watching. A week passed, and then another. There were no grand moments, and no lines crossed. That didn't mean there weren't small threads stitched between school days and pickup times. Sometimes Daniel brought Sophie a snack, and Clara would tease him for forgetting the no peanut rule. Other days, Sophie insisted on showing Clara her newest sketch before she showed anyone else, even her dad. Daniel lingered just a little longer each afternoon. It was not enough to draw attention, but it was enough to notice things. The way Clara adjusted a student's backpack strap without saying a word, or how she crouched to eye level when a child cried, her voice dropping to a murmur no one else could hear. How she always remembered birthdays, every single one. Clara was helping a boy zip his coat when Daniel saw it. That light laugh she gave when she pretended the zipper had magic teeth. The way her nose crinkled when she smiled. It was not something she did for him or meant for anyone. It was just her in a way that was both symbolic and heavy with meaning. Daniel had been around long enough to know genuine warmth when he saw it, and he realized, standing there like some awkward extra in the background, that she was beautiful. Her beauty wasn't in a flashy magazine cover way. Just something quiet. Something grounded. A kind of calm that made the rest of the world feel less heavy. He didn't say anything, just held Sophie's sketchpad and waited. But the thought lingered long after they walked away. The accusation came on a Wednesday. Clara found the envelope in her mailbox after lunch, folded inside, a printed email from Rachel Harwood, sent directly to Principal Levi Franklin and CC'd to the PTA board. I wish to express concern that Miss Hayes is exhibiting favoritism in her classroom, specifically regarding Sophie Reed. My daughter, Maya, has expressed frustration that Sophie receives extra attention, special praise, and more one-on-one time. While I understand all students have different needs, the level of attention is inconsistent and potentially unfair. I hope this can be addressed before it becomes more of a concern among other parents. Clara stared at the page for a full minute before she blinked. She didn't crumple it, didn't fold it back. She just read it again. The door to the lounge creaked open. Melissa stepped in, carrying 2 mugs. One look at Clara's face, and she set them down fast. What now? Clara handed her the email. Melissa read it and rolled her eyes so hard they nearly echoed. She's unbelievable. It's not technically untrue, Clara said. Sophie has needed extra support. She came in the middle of the year and was barely speaking to anyone. Melissa pointed at her. You're saying that like it's a defense. It's not, Clara. Don't forget that. It's just what you do with every kid who needs it. Clara exhaled. I know. Melissa put a hand on her shoulder. This isn't about Maya. This is about you and Daniel. Clara said nothing. She just nodded. The inevitable summons to the principal's office came that afternoon, and Clara stepped into the room, feeling like a child pulled into the office, caught in some mischief. Levi Franklin, the school's principal, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his navy sweater vest. I trust you, he said. Let's get that out of the way first. Clara sat straight, her hands folded. The excellent relationship she had with the principal told her to expect this before she stepped into the room. Principal Franklin was an older man, 50s, a man with experience running schools and dealing with the messy politics that sometimes cropped up. But, he continued, we're a small school in a smaller town, and rumors echo. When a parent like Rachel Harwood speaks up, others tend to listen. I have done nothing wrong. I know you haven't. She's just spinning it, making it look like more. I believe you. He let the silence sit for a moment. But I have to say something, he added, just in case. Keep things above board and be aware of perception, especially at events. Try not to be seen alone with Mr. Reed and don't respond to gossip, even if you hear it. Clara nodded, measured her response. I've heard her speaking several times, but it's never been enough to warrant a response. Good. Keep it that way. Anything else? Principal Franklin sighed. Just don't let it get in your head. You're good at what you do. This doesn't change that. That evening, Clara sat in her car long after she pulled into her apartment parking lot. She didn't cry, didn't rage, but the silence was heavier than it had been in weeks. Pickup that day had been slower than usual. The sky had turned gray with the promise of rain, and the kids clung to every second of playground time before the drizzle started. Clara stood under the awning near the gate, clipboard in hand, eyes skimming names without seeing them. She heard his voice before she saw him. Looks like we're racing the storm. Daniel's coat was half-zipped, while Sophie skipped ahead of him with her hood bouncing behind her like a cape. Clara managed to smile. Better than indoor recess. Sophie waved as she reached the gate. Bye, Miss Hayes. See you tomorrow. Daniel lingered for a moment, shifting the strap of his bag higher on his shoulder. Are you okay? Yeah, why? You usually make some joke about being stuck here forever. Or surviving second lunch duty. She laughed, barely. Long day. Do you want to talk about it? Daniel asked, his gaze staying steady. Clara looked away. Not really, but thanks. Daniel didn't push. He just stood there, the silence between them soft and safe. People are complicated, she said finally. That's all. Daniel gave a small nod. They usually are. The breeze picked up, and Clara pulled her cardigan closer. Daniel stepped back, ready to go, then paused. For what it's worth, he said. I think you're doing everything right. Clara met his eyes, and that moment, quiet, unassuming, landed deeper than she expected. Thanks, she said. He gave her a nod, then followed Sophie to the car, pulling the hood of her jacket up as they walked. Clara stayed by the gate a few seconds longer, watching them go, her clipboard forgotten. She didn't feel better, but she didn't feel quite as alone. By mid-morning, Clara could tell something had changed. Sophie, usually quiet but steady, moved through the classroom as if everything were made of glass. Her sketch pad stayed zipped inside her backpack. She didn't raise her hand, didn't smile, didn't speak. At recess, she lingered near the edge of the play structure, watching the other children without moving toward them. It was during independent reading that Clara sat beside her. The others were tucked into beanbags and carpet corners, some pretending to read, others whispering behind chapter books. Sophie stared at her unopened notebook like it might bite. Clara leaned in, voice soft. Not feeling creative today? Sophie shook her head, just once. Did something happen? There was no answer, but Clara waited. Eventually, Sophie whispered, "They said you're going to get in trouble." "Who said that?" Clara asked, her chest tightened. "Some girls near the swings. They were talking about you and my dad. They said, it's weird that it's not allowed." For a moment, Clara didn't speak. Sophie's voice dropped further. "Are you in trouble? Because of me?" "Sweetheart, no," Clara said, reaching for her gently. "Absolutely not. This isn't your fault, not even a little. But they said it's because of us. Because we're close." Sophie's words trembled at the edges, but she didn't cry. Clara looked at her for a long moment, then spoke with care. Sometimes people talk about things they don't understand, and sometimes they don't enjoy seeing something kind, especially if it doesn't fit into what they expect. Sophie's brow furrowed. "But I didn't mean to make it weird." "You didn't," Clara said firmly. "You've done nothing wrong." There was a pause, and then, quietly, Sophie leaned against her shoulder. Clara didn't move. She just let the moment settle there, the weight of a child's trust resting against her arm. It was evening when Clara stood in front of Daniel's porch, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, and the echo of Sophie's voice still circling in her head. A part of her didn't even know why she was here, while another part understood in exact detail. The two warred with each other for several moments before she reached up and knocked on the door, two staccato raps. Daniel opened the door, looking as he always did, tired, kind, and vaguely surprised to see anyone show up unannounced. It was some moments before he spoke, appearing unable to find his voice. "Sophie's fine," he said before she could ask. "She fell asleep after dinner. It seems it was a rough day, but she's okay now." Clara nodded. "I'm not here about Sophie." "Not entirely." Daniel stepped back to let her in, the smell of roasted garlic and oregano still warm in the air. A half-drained pot of spaghetti sauce sat cooling on the stove, while a soft hum of music played in the background, something instrumental and unobtrusive. Something about the domesticity, the sense of home and comfort, filled Clara's heart with a longing she didn't think she had ever acknowledged. At Daniel's invitation, they sat at the kitchen table without ceremony, two mugs between them steaming. Clara didn't speak right away. Neither did he. Finally, she said, "Rachel filed a complaint." Daniel looked up. "What?" "She emailed the principal, claimed I've been giving Sophie special attention, and accused me of favoritism, inappropriate behavior." His expression darkened, then shifted into something quieter. "What did the school say?" "Franklin has been supportive, said he trusts me. But he also reminded me we're in a small town and people notice things, even the things that aren't there." Daniel sat back in his chair, brow furrowed. "She's using Sophie." It was the statement of a man who knew someone had crossed lines that weren't meant to be crossed. An image of Daniel, the implacable protector, arose in her mind. No one would attack his child and get away with it. Mild-mannered men were sometimes the most dangerous. "She's using me," Clara said. "Sophie's just the excuse." He didn't speak for a while, but when he did, his voice was measured. "Do you want me to stop coming by? Keep my distance?" Clara shook her head. "I don't want to pretend this doesn't matter." That changed the air between them, something unspoken, acknowledged now. Daniel's fingers tapped against his mug. "Once the school year ends, the problem ends too." "Exactly. So we wait." "Quietly," she said. Daniel smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting in that careful, honest way she'd come to recognize. "I can do quiet," he said. "But just so it's clear, I like you, Clara, a lot. I think I have for a while now." Clara's breath caught, not in surprise, but in something closer to relief. "I like you too," she said. "Maybe too much, for how slow this needs to move." Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "In the end, it will be worth the wait." Clara left before it grew too dark. There were no long goodbyes, no lingering on the porch, nothing that any observer could use against them. But the warmth in her chest stayed with her all the way home. For the first time in days, the waiting felt like something to look forward to. The week rolled on with no more whispers, no additional notes in Clara's mailbox. Whatever had stirred the waters seemed to settle again, at least on the surface. Sophie returned to her drawings. At first, she stayed close to her desk, only showing Clara when asked. But by Thursday, she stood at the front of the room during morning sharing time, sketchpad in hand, her voice soft but clear as she explained her latest picture. A garden full of mismatched sunflowers, each with a distinct face. "This one's Miss Hayes," she said, pointing to a smiling bloom with thick lashes and wide arms. Clara felt a pang she didn't let show, and for the first time, she knew that though Rachel's accusations were untrue, the affection she felt for this precious child was real. Afterward, the class clapped. Sophie smiled, really smiled, and didn't shrink from it. At lunch, she sat with two other girls, trading carrot sticks and stickers like old friends. When one of them asked if she wanted to play jump rope at recess, she didn't hesitate. She just said yes. Melissa noticed, of course. She always did. By the copy machine later that day, she nudged Clara with her elbow. "See? You are magic." "I just let her grow," Clara said. "Exactly," Melissa replied. "You gave her soil, the rest is Sophie." That evening, Clara lingered in her classroom longer than usual. The sunlight slanted through the windows in soft golds and blues. The walls were quiet, the desks empty. She stood in front of Sophie's sunflower drawing, tacked neatly beside the math charts and reading stars. For a moment, all the noise faded. Rachel's rumors, the watchful eyes, the cautious meetings. What remained was the simple clarity of what mattered. One child, steady again, and the sense that something real had taken root. Not just in Sophie, but in herself too. The multi-purpose room buzzed with excitement. Chairs scraped, and programs fluttered in eager hands. Paper flowers hung from the ceiling, strung together by pipe cleaner stems and overzealous amounts of tape. Student artwork lined the walls, uneven and colorful. Clara moved through it all with practiced grace, checking name tags, organizing readers, and answering parents' questions with warmth and quiet authority. This was the good part, the part where the effort showed. It was these moments that reminded her why she taught. She was standing near the student displays when she noticed Sophie by the door, frozen still, her small hand limp in Daniel's. Clara followed the direction of her gaze, where an elegant woman stood looking out over the room as if it didn't meet her personal standards. From what little Clara had heard and Sophie's reaction, this could only be one woman. Vanessa, her mother. Vanessa was hard to miss. Her hair was sleek, styled into a loose chignon. A cream blazer hung on her shoulders, one that probably cost more than Clara's salary for an entire month, highlighted by gold accents at her wrists and collarbones. Her heels clicked as she moved, not rushed, not searching, just making herself seen. She posed near the art wall for a photo someone else had no doubt offered to take. Daniel's posture shifted, and his voice dropped low. "She didn't tell me she was coming." Sophie gripped his hand tighter. Clara approached. "Do you want me to stay close?" Sophie didn't answer, but she stepped closer, her body angling toward Clara like a magnet. A moment later, Vanessa spotted them. She smiled, bright and polished. "There she is, my little artist." The words sounded cheerful, but the tone came too fast, too rehearsed, like a B-list actress trying to remember her lines and the exact amount of emotion the director wanted. Sophie didn't move as her mother approached, her little body still angled toward Clara. Vanessa crouched, her posture awkward because of heels too high, purse too structured to manage the gesture, and held out her arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Still, Sophie didn't move. Clara could feel the tension rolling through Daniel, restrained and taut. After a long pause, Sophie stepped forward with the kind of reluctant compliance that wasn't affection at all. Vanessa hugged her briefly, then released her like she wasn't sure what to do with her hands afterward. "I almost didn't make it," she said. "It was silly," I told Darren, "but then I thought, well, I might as well drop by. These things are so charming." Daniel's mouth set in a line. "It's her life, Vanessa, not a sideshow." Vanessa blinked, unfazed. "Always so serious, Daniel. You should lighten up a little." Sophie had already retreated to Clara's side, the action bringing her to her mother's attention. Vanessa's eyes drifted toward Clara, lingering a moment too long. You must be Miss Hayes, she said, her smile edged now. Daniel's mentioned you, and of course, Sophie draws you often enough, doesn't she? Clara offered a handshake. Thank you for coming tonight. Sophie worked very hard. Vanessa's gaze slid from Clara to Daniel and back. Then she said, her voice quiet, You know, I used to joke that Daniel would end up dating someone from the PTA. I didn't expect it to be the staff. Before Clara could reply, before the sting even landed, there came a faint, familiar sound behind her. A sharp intake of breath, then a single, almost imperceptible laugh. Clara didn't turn. She didn't need to. It was Rachel, close enough to listen in at the worst possible moment. Vanessa went on, unbothered. But I suppose she's good with kids. That's what counts. Daniel stepped forward. Just one step. Enough, he said, voice low, even. This isn't the time. Vanessa raised both brows, surprised. Touchy. I suppose I hit a nerve. Your daughter is right here, he replied. Maybe try focusing on her instead of insulting people who show up. That landed. Vanessa's smile slipped for the first time all evening. She said nothing else. Just turned, smoothing her blazer, eyes casting over the crowd, like she might find someone more interesting. Rachel moved away a moment later, her expression smug. The scent of fuel added to gossip already smoldering. After the performances, Sophie clung to Clara during cleanup, not asking, but silently requesting. Clara stayed beside her, quiet, present. Vanessa never approached again. She left early, air-kissing Rachel on the way out, as if they were old friends. Her heels echoed on the tile floor. Clara had not missed the way the two had orbited all evening and had been together in close conversation, at least once. The two women were like peas in a pod, though Clara supposed Rachel was not so determined to be oblivious as Vanessa was. Daniel helped stack chairs, his expression unreadable. Later, when the last paper flower came down and the lights dimmed, Clara stood alone in the quiet of her classroom. She didn't cry, but the ache beneath her ribs settled deep and cold. Clara hadn't asked for this fight, but it was here now, and somehow, it didn't scare her. Not the way it used to. Clara finished wiping down the last of the tables while the janitor collected trash bags from the corner bins. Most of the parents were long gone, leaving behind a mix of paper programs, forgotten scarves, and the scent of juice boxes and ambition. The gym was nearly dark now, only a few fluorescents buzzing overhead. Daniel stepped through the open side door, holding Sophie's coat in one hand and his own in the other. Sophie fell asleep in the car, he said quietly. She didn't even ask for music, just lights out. Clara set the cloth aside. Tonight was a lot. He nodded, then added, Thank you for staying with her. She didn't want me to go. I know, he said, and the weight of it. Sophie's preference, Vanessa's absence, everything unsaid, hung between them. In many ways, Clara knew she was already the mother figure that Sophie had never had with her mother. Clara leaned against the table, arms crossed over her chest. She's hurting, she said, and confused. Vanessa showing up like that. It was careless. Daniel gave a quick breath of agreement, more sigh than laugh. That's Vanessa in a nutshell. She gives just enough effort to feel justified, never enough to be inconvenient. There was no bitterness in his voice, just resignation, like he had come to terms with his wife's character long before. Clara hesitated. She said something to me about you. About us. Daniel's jaw tightened. I heard. She meant it to hurt. And it did? Clara considered that. Not the way she intended, but yes, a little. Daniel moved closer, stopping a few feet away. Not too near, but near enough that his approach spoke of purpose. With the doors still open and the janitor humming somewhere in the distance, he would not make any overt gestures, but to Clara, who now knew him well enough to understand, it meant the world. I'm sorry, he said. You shouldn't have to take bullets for a war you never joined. I knew what I was walking into, she said, even if I didn't know who'd be firing. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Do you regret it? Clara's answer came without hesitation. No. That seemed to steady him. But I am tired of pretending this is something that doesn't matter, she added. Daniel's voice dropped lower, gentler. It matters to me. Clara's heart ached, Not from hurt, but from wanting. The time between now and the end of the school year felt like it would never come, would never free them from this half-life, waiting for everything they could become to each other to be a reality. She nodded. I know. The janitor's cart squeaked in the hallway, recalling them both to the current situation. Daniel glanced toward the sound, then back to her. I'd like to talk about what happens after all this, when we're allowed to say things out loud. Clara's smile faded, just slightly. Her fingers toyed with the edge of the table, a slow, absent movement. Then she glanced up at him. Can I ask you something? Daniel's brow lifted, open but cautious. Of course. Clara hesitated, not out of doubt, but because the words felt heavier than she expected. How did you end up with someone like Vanessa? Daniel's eyes didn't harden, and he didn't flinch. But he took a breath, deep and slow, like he'd been waiting for someone to ask for years. I think, he said after a long pause, I wanted someone who looked like the life I thought I was supposed to have. Clara stayed quiet, letting him continue. She was bright, ambitious, and beautiful in that sharp, intimidating way that made you feel like if she chose you, it meant something. I just lost my dad, and I was living in this half-built version of a life I didn't know how to finish. She walked in and made it all look polished. He gave a dry smile. Turns out, polish doesn't mean permanence. Clara didn't smile back. She just looked at him. She said something tonight. Something like, he was never this involved when we were married. Like she didn't even realize the difference was, Sophie. Daniel's gaze dropped for a moment. Back then, I didn't know how to show up. Not really. I thought being steady meant being quiet, reliable. I didn't understand how loud love needs to be sometimes. Her chest tightened, not from pity, but recognition. Do you think she ever loved Sophie? She asked. I think she loved the idea of Sophie, he said. But the reality? This business of needing someone, of a child depending on her, is not what Vanessa signs up for. Clara nodded, more to herself than to him. He looked at her, a bit more openly now. Do you still want to talk? About after this? Yes, she said, but not tonight. Tonight, I just needed the truth. Then we're off to a good start.
Original heartwarming fiction every week. Subscribe for your next great story.